into two things. When we talk about entrepreneurship and any kind of venture that you want to start, we are
Mhm.
thinking about an idea. Like, you're haunted by that idea, and then you are always saying, okay, this is the problem I'm looking for, and then you cannot
Yes.
sleep, right? So that's the kind of thing that entrepreneurs have, right? That the thing, the thing is, like, they cannot sleep, and as a result, they end up creating something wonderful, or at least from their perspective, it is wonderful, right? So,
Mhm.
what was that? What was that kind of idea that you felt like it is necessary for you to look into, and then you started your journey?
There's a few different ways that that's happened to me in the past. I guess I'll speak with that in reference most recently to MirrorTrip, my current endeavor. So for me, I was in Europe on my 2016 summer vacation, and I was driving with my wife. We were traveling through Spain and through France, and it was a road trip, a lot of it. We wanted to drive and visit a lot of cities, and it was sort of I ended up organizing two sort of arbitrary loops, one in each country, just because I knew from previous experience that it can be quite expensive to pick a car up and drop it off in one city. I looked it up to how much it would be to pick up in Paris and drop off in Madrid, and I think it was, like a 1,500 euro drop-off fee on top of the regular rental type of thing, which would have been a fun trip still, but, being a penny pincher as I am, I decided not to, and we ended up flying to connect the loops. It was sort of on the home stretch toward Madrid, kilometer number, I think about 2000 or something like that. We've been driving a lot, and it sort of dawned to me, I started having the initial idea as to, what if there was a platform that matched people up driving in opposite directions, so that we could both have, enjoyable one-way trips without imposing a logistical problem on the rental companies and avoiding that drop-off fee. So, that was a very sort of loose idea at that stage. But like you said, that idea sort of gets in your head at that stage. And the more you think about it, the more it sort of burns in there. And so I started thinking about it more and more. The next morning, the first thing I did was wake up. I was talking to my wife about it all the way for the rest of the journey. And the next thing I did when I woke up was, of course, has anyone else done it before? Usually when you have an idea, that's your first inkling, right? Why hasn't someone done this idea? It might be a bad idea, or maybe no one's thought of it, or maybe there's another challenge that you're not considering yet. So looking into that, and a lot of validation, I saw a lot of validation immediately. Particularly, the first thing I found was a blog explaining that it was a problem, and these are the things you might try to avoid it. Maybe you could hire a tow truck company, or sometimes seasonally there are discounts depending on what type of year it is, this, that, and the other. But what I was most excited about was at the end of the blog there was a comment section, and in that section was about 200 or 300 comments, people saying, yes, I've had this problem, me too, me too, me too. And then even some of the comments were people actually trying to arrange sort of similar things in the comment section of a blog. Does anyone know of anyone that needs to get a car back on such and such a date, and this type of thing? So that's when I started to get more excited about it. Yeah, so I mean, I can keep talking about the genesis of this idea for 5 more minutes or so. I'm not sure where you want me to stop, but yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it needs to be something you're excited about. I think the traditionalists would say that you should be solving a problem of your own, rather than something that you've sort of dreamed up, a hypothetical problem. And usually, solving a problem of your own at least validates that it's a real world problem at that stage.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's interesting what you said, because you saw a problem, you sort of wanted to validate, right? So you didn't just jump onto just creating the solution, but then you wanted to first of all validate if
Mhm.
others are also facing the similar problem, which is interesting, because I haven't heard this from a lot of entrepreneurs. Some of them, they have actually tried this approach.
Uh,
So maybe then talk about why you wanted to validate instead of just jumping and creating a solution.
Sure, I can get to that. Once bitten, twice shy, I think is the phrase for that one. But being of the entrepreneurial mindset, of course, this wasn't my first idea, and I built things before. Before this, previously was an augmented reality startup platform that I built around about 2011, 2010. And basically, I mean, it wasn't solving a problem of my own. I didn't need a solution for it. But I saw augmented reality as this sort of technology of the future, and that I should be involved in this, and that I should just build something because people are going to want it. And I'm not quite sure exactly what that is, but I'll just get going and figure it out later. And, you know, 4,000 hours, 4,000 development hours later, you know, trying to get on the phone and sell this thing to people and just confusing the hell out of them, really. What is this? Why do I need it? Sort of thing. And I mean, even then, I mean, I think a lot of people jumped on board with that solution. What I built probably was one of the first content management systems for an augmented reality app, where you could upload different media and collateral and publish it down into your own app. I had an agency background, and I saw how expensive it was to build these types of apps. And I thought, sure, people are probably going to want in the future a way to sort of reduce the cost of producing these types of things. So I just got in there and got busy and did it. I mean, yeah, that was basically the crux of it. But then looking at a lot of my competitors who ended up overtaking me, companies like Blipar and a couple of others like it, ended up sort of folding a few years down the road, even though they were able to get massive investments and significant valuations. Ultimately, people just didn't want the technology. I mean, I think in terms of what you've seen success in that area, things like Pokemon Go and Snapchat have probably made the biggest impact in terms of augmented reality in people's lives. And it might seem frivolous, but I mean, that was just a thing that I had to learn the hard way. So, I mean, turning around from that into something like this, I was much more cautious, wanting to validate the idea, wanting to speak to a lot of people in the first place to make sure I wasn't the only one. And then even to dig deeper into how I would even pull it off. Why would a rental car company let me do this with their cars? Why wouldn't they just do it themselves? This sort of thing, you know, how would this actually play out and pull off? So I was very cautious with investigating all of those angles because of my previous experience of build it and they will come, as they say. So I guess it's what you would call the lean startup approach. Eric Reece, I'm not sure if you've read his book, but yeah. It speaks very favorably to that type of approach. I mean, other people have different opinions as well, too. Like someone like Peter Thiel, for example, doesn't really believe in that foundationally and the lean startup approach. If your idea is significant enough and forward-thinking enough, then sometimes you just need to back yourself, I guess, too. But from my experience, I was looking to take a different approach.
Interesting, because you know, like I said, only some entrepreneurs with the history of failing or maybe having a rough experience in the past will try this approach, because the first time entrepreneurs perhaps would not go these routes just to validate the idea. Right. And then what did you do? Like validation, and then how it all started.
So as I sort of alluded just before, my next part of the strategy was sort of planning out how this would actually work. Why would a rental car company let me do this? How would it work? We wanted to think of an economical way to drive this forward. So of course, going out and buying your own fleet is quite capital intensive. We wanted to build it off the back of rental car companies and bootstrap them and work with them. So, I mean, the first part of it, we wanted to work within the confines of their existing systems and not have to have them make allowances for us. So we were sort of humming and hawing about that. I was on phone calls to companies like Avis and Hertz, asking about my hypothetical friend, if there was a way I could meet them in a different city and they could drive the car back instead of me. And they all sort of told me no way. So I kept pushing at that, and eventually came to the realization that most rental car companies, if you pick a car up in one city, you can sign another driver onto the contract at any other city. So if you picked up at Avis in Los Angeles, for example, and you wanted to drive up the coast and you got tired of driving, you might stop in San Francisco and sign your traveling partner onto the contract so they can take up the load of driving with you. So that's widely accepted, and we thought that was a real innovation, and that's how we would end up operating with this. And then beyond that, we also did a lot of research into what are called global distribution systems, GDSs. So this is the type of company that would power a company like Expedia or something like that, the type of back end that creates an API that integrates you with 44 different rental car companies or a whole bunch of airlines or hotels or this sort of thing. So we did a lot of work with them as well too, figuring out how their booking systems work. And then finally, I mean, this was part of the reason I was most interested in the idea from a strategic perspective, was the patentability of it. So it was all quite hush-hush at this stage. It was novel. It hadn't been done before. And because of the clearly defined concept of some of the criteria that needed to be met for this, it was a pretty eligible candidate for a software patent as well too. So strategically, we wanted that as the final kicker as to why a rental car company wouldn't just turn around during negotiations and take the idea from us and roll with it themselves. So that was basically the final part of the due diligence that we did. And then finally, of course, reaching out to the rental companies to sign deals with them, at which stage a lot of things changed anyway. But at least that gave us a good footing to start off on.
Mm-hmm. And as far as building this platform, like, do you have a background of maybe the development background or you know, what kind of background do you have?
I'm a computer science major, so yeah, the building, I took care of a lot of that. I mean, also from previous experience trying to do it all myself, I realized that it's very important to pull in people with complementary skill sets as well too, people on the design and marketing side of things as well too, so that the overall product looks appealing and polished and has clear messaging. My background is with the production agency here in Vancouver. So actually, when I bought the idea back, I sold it to the owners of the company I work with, and they ended up taking a stake in the company as well too. And that created a pretty neat symbiosis of the whole marketing and design and development side of it, sort of all tying in together. And yeah, it was a great way to move it forward. So they co-founded the company with me after that.
And now coming back to this creation of the platform, once you have created, perhaps, you know, you reached out to partner, like you said, you reached out to partnering with the rental car companies,
mm-hmm.
and then I'm sure there are some challenges, right, as far as you know, the companies, how they work, and maybe the pricing. And there are so many challenges, right? So how did you figure out the algorithm? Like, okay, this is going to be the kind of way we want to work forward. Like, what are the strategies that you use in order to sort of maybe see if all of those rental car companies provide the same pricing? I don't know. Like, was there any challenges as such?
Absolutely. I mean, so one part of it was the algorithm and figuring out if people could use it efficiently and if it would make sense to them and how the platform would actually work. So this is where having the complementary skill sets pulled in was very useful, you know, to be able to iterate several times on graphic design, perform user testing, so recruit beta testers and things like that, and get screen recordings of them working with your software to see if it's confusing or if it's straightforward. So I mean, that's one part of it, but the pricing and the deals with the rental companies as well too. I mean, that was quite interesting as well too. I mean, our initial idea is that we were going to be very disruptive with this. That simply we could use a GDS, like one of these booking API platforms, and not really even have to talk to the rental car companies at all, because we'd already come up with the sign the person onto the contract at the other location type of thing. Our plan was simply just to start booking their cars without even sort of seeking or asking permission, and going about it that way. We got quite far in and quite heavily invested with these booking platform APIs, and they're quite legacy, so the software coding is quite difficult and extended to work with them. But we finally got to the stage where we're almost ready to go for production with this, and then the booking platform APIs companies turn around and say to us, "Oh, by the way, you still have to sign deals for approval with every single company you want to work with." So, oh, come on, you didn't tell us this. So
that's what I meant, right? That's what I meant. You know, usually with this company, it's not straightforward. You know, so.
It's not straightforward, and some of them are protective, some of them are open-minded. So I mean, the other challenging thing is really there's only 3 rental car companies in the world. I mean, they've all amalgamated into conglomerates. There's Hertz and Avis Budget and Enterprise, which owns a bunch of brands. So that's it. So really, if you're talking to one of them, you're talking to the CEO of one of those 3 companies, is what it's boiling down to. So you don't have a lot of room for error in that situation either. But anyway, so we got put in contact with a bunch of account executives with these companies, and conversations bubbled up higher and higher and higher on all of them. And yeah, there were mixed reactions. Some were very protective and saw this as a threat rather than an opportunity. One of our value propositions is we wanted to pitch it to them that this wouldn't cannibalize their existing clientele, really. One-way car rental drop-off fees isn't something they make a ton of money off, because it represents a logistical cost to them. They either have to re-register the car in a different province or heavily discount it to encourage someone else to drive it back, or sometimes hire a tow truck to do it. So, I mean, it can cost hundreds or thousands of dollars for them to do that. Which is why it exists in the first place. But beyond that, making it price competitive with traditional alternatives such as bus or train or short haul flights. If you can bring the cost down to compete with the bus, I mean, it's more enjoyable, faster, more flexible, all this sort of thing, then you're really going after a completely different market for people that wouldn't even consider this mode of transport in the first place. Mm-hmm. So that was part of our selling point to them. And yeah, I mean, there were mixed results. Like I said, some protective, but some very open-minded to it. A lot of them are looking to innovate in this space already. You've seen companies like Enterprise create Zipcar and other brands like that. I mean, essentially, fleet owners are always looking for the next biggest thing in order to innovate and get a leg up on their competitors. So, I mean, that was what drove a lot of the conversation along. Hertz particularly took a really open mind to it. And, you know, we had lots of discussions with them. And it eventually bubbled up to their global head office. And yeah, everyone was on board with the idea. So we managed to launch a pilot with them in Western Canada. And yeah, I mean, in terms of the pricing, that was obviously part of the negotiating process as well too. And ironically, at the end, they didn't even want to work with the booking system that we'd spent all that time and effort integrating with. So we sort of threw that out the window and launched with a slightly different approach. So, like you said, always a little bit different than how you imagine it to be.
Yeah. And it's interesting because what you're trying to do, right? It's slightly different from the regular traditional car renting companies, right? So obviously, like you said, you know, there are some challenges as far as you being the threat is concerned, right? So some companies will keep that open mind, yet some will not. Mm-hmm. And in spite of all that, you know, it's great that, you know, you managed to onboard some of the clients, I mean, the companies, which is great. But now on the traction side, like, how do you see the traction now? Like, you know, from where you started to where you are now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we just launched in 2019, so we had a brief start before the pandemic commenced. So it's been a little bumpy to begin with, but we've seen steady growth actually during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, we saw year-on-year growth, not phenomenal, but just people of the realization that from a pandemic perspective, this is a much safer mode of travel compared to flying or taking the bus or ride sharing because you get direct control over your bubble that you're traveling with. From the traction side of it, though, we're in 3 cities at the moment, pilot with Hertz in Western Canada, Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton, and we've had several hundred customers sign up already, and almost 200 trips posted in that space of time. So, yeah, we've seen quite a lot of positive response from the launch as well too. A lot of well wishers, a lot of people asking us when we're coming to their city, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, the overall response has been very positive, and we're definitely looking forward to the fog lifting a little bit from the pandemic this summer over here. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with the pandemic, it's never easier to jump into the travel. I mean, it's kind of a travel industry, right? You know, what you're doing is it may not be directly related to it, but still when people want to travel, they would perhaps use the car rental services, right? So yeah, I mean, it's related to travel. So obviously, you know, it has been impacted. Yet, you know, you said like you are operating in the 3 cities now.
3 cities at the moment, yes.
Yeah, it's only in the Canada.
Only in Canada at the moment, yes.
Okay. And so I mean, how do you get paid in that perspective? So you have some commissions, right, on top of the renting?
Yeah, I mean, part of our value proposition is sort of security from a personal standpoint, but also from a financial standpoint as well. Too. So we act as a financial escrow between both of the customers, so they're not exposing themselves financially to each other. They both book through our website. They find a match on our platform. Then both of them make a payment to us separately. We make one consolidated payment to the rental company on their behalf, and we exact a 10% service fee on top of that as well too, which is how we make our money. So 10% on top of what the rental car companies are charging.
Interesting. And like you said, like perhaps there are non-competitors for you at the moment, like what you're doing, or do you have competitors?
There's always an indirect competitor, usually, if you're doing something that's worth it. I mean, I think our indirect competitors would just be the traditional alternatives: short haul flight, bus, carpool, ride sharing as well too. So yeah, definitely competitors there. What we're excited about is that we're price competitive with them for the first time. One-way car rentals have never been price competitive with these types of transport. So that's the angle we're interested in pursuing. So yeah.
And what about the application as such? Like if you think about at the moment you have applied this to, I don't know, car renting. I don't know, can this have a different form of application or use cases?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about expensive assets that you move around, really, it just comes down to vehicles, really, in terms of expensive mobile assets. So our software patent covers vehicles, basically, and in that sense, in a way, basically, if you're matching people together to make it so that the vehicle always comes back to where it left from, that's basically what we're all about. If your drop-off date is adjacent to someone else's pickup date and your direction of travel is opposite, and that's exactly what our platform's all about solving. And yeah, we get a lot of questions and interest into other areas as well too. Particularly moving's a big one as well. People hiring cargo vans and things like that for moving from one city to another. Can be quite expensive. And then I think more recently as well too, you've seen a lot of interest in the privatization of air travel and that type of thing as well too. So vertical takeoff landing taxis and that type of thing as well, or private jets, this type of thing. I mean, they all run into similar problems.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And with the pandemic, especially, I mean, related to travel again, how have you been affected in that perspective, like as far as investments or, I don't know, finding resources or expanding? Like, what are some of the challenges you are facing at the moment, and as far as your industry is concerned?
I think overall volume is probably the biggest challenge at the moment. Like I said, we were able to achieve year-on-year growth, but it was nominal. I mean, not as much as a startup would like to see, because overall volume is down, right? Interest specifically in our mode of transport is up because of the pandemic, but overall volume is down. So that's probably been the biggest challenge. And I think the way things are heading, it's trending successfully enough that I think there's a great case to expand.
Mm-hmm.
But seeing that volume first is just that final last thing. I mean, we already have interested people from the investment side of things, looking to back our play into more cities in the US and that type of thing. But personally, before we take that leap, we just want to see a little bit more volume in our own backyard. So that's just what we're wrapping up with here at the moment in our pilot.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because I mean, one of the most affected industries is travel, right? So especially hotels and travel, like it is one of those industry which is affected. And I see, like, other industries, for example, IT and software, and those they're pretty solid, in that perspective, because they don't need a lot of interaction with people. Of course, like it can be done remotely, and that works. So I felt interested in your case, when I received a notification about MirrorTrip. So yeah, I mean, it's challenging, yet, you are trying to do something interesting that, I must congratulate you for doing that,
Thank you.
And how about the development? At the moment, you're taking care, like you said before, like you're taking care of the development, but do you also have other resources who is working with you, or like, how does that work?
Mostly myself, but like I said, partnering with my co-founders own a production agency here in Vancouver as well too. So lots of resources. We have 12 software developers on staff, several graphic designers, these types of things. So lots of people around to lend a helping hand, and that's been great, helping drive this thing along.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, otherwise it's a very challenging space, I mean,
Oh,
even,
exactly.
yeah, I mean, I see booking.com, like, I use that very often for traveling, and I've not even visited that like for a year and a half now.
Mhm. No, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I mean, I mean, as far as the investment goes, right? So how you are now reaching out to investors, like, I mean, this is one of the biggest tests as an entrepreneur, right? So I think to create an idea is one thing, to reach out to customers is one thing, but to actually find the investment is whole new. I mean, different game altogether, right? So how are you reaching out to investor if you have at all reached out to investor?
We're testing the waters. Like I said, personally, I'd like to see a little bit more volume. I don't want to take anyone else's money unless I'm convinced that I'm going to turn that into even more. But I mean, and the other side of it too is kind of proudly, we're bootstrapped so far, and then I'd like to keep it that way for as long as possible. So unless there's a really strong case that taking on more investment can actually propel us forward in some way that's going to be beneficial for us. But there's been a lot of interest in the idea, like I said, and recently we were involved in an accelerator program where our pitch deck was spread around. And actually, recently we had several investors reach out to us, and some of them even purely just based on the idea, like I said, are sort of interested in working with us and helping us expand. So I mean, it's great, and that's a lot of validation of the concept as well too. I think we'll probably be considering it more seriously at the end of the summer, is what I'm expecting at this stage.
Yeah, because even I think the travel industry will pick up, midsummer, I would say, here in Europe as well, because the government has said that they might open up restaurants from mid of May or something. I mean, this is just a preliminary guess I have, they might open. But then again, are we allowed to travel to another country? The borders will be open. That's a different puzzle altogether. Nobody knows.
To take a stack of cash and then for there to still be an active travel ban, exactly. So we need to see a change in the market first. But yeah, definitely, it's always top of mind. But yeah.
What's the future? What's the future? Let's talk about the future. I understood your past, I understood your present. Let's talk about your future now. How do you like to see moving forward? Like, how do you like to see MirrorTrip going forward? What are the challenges that you'd like to tackle? Everything.
I think our vision is, I mean, ultimately, I think MirrorTrip is a type of car sharing, a new type of car sharing that we call ride switching. So similar to car sharing clubs that are out there, like there was Car2Go and Zipcar over here in North America as well too. I'd like to see it become like that, but purely for intercity travel. So our vision is a global car sharing club for intercity travel, basically. And to that point, geographic expansion is going to be top of mind for us. So the deal with Hertz is great because it's been ratified at the Hertz global level. So that leaves a door open for expanding to a lot of their locations. They also own Dollar and Thrifty as well too. So there's a lot of locations we can access through that, and that's great. The other side of it, of course, too, is just running the numbers and picking the most attractive routes to start off with as well, too. So because we only have a pilot at the moment as well, too, we wanted to capture mind share from people that were outside of our geographic region as well, too. We created a tool on our website called Price Lab. And what that does is it searches every single rental provider at 26,000 different locations throughout North America. And helps find you the cheapest rates, even if it's outside of MirrorTrip. So if MirrorTrip isn't in your city yet, you can still find the cheapest rates by using our Price Lab tool. And a great thing about that is we now have a database of more than 10 million price records for a whole bunch of different locations throughout the country and continent. So we're able to use that to strategize the next moves in terms of the cities where this is going to be most popular, and move from there. So yeah, we'll be looking to branch out. Our current plan is to be in 10 more cities in North America within the next year. And ultimately, I mean, like I said, I came up with this idea in Europe in the first place. I think the European Common Union would be, political union would be a great place for this to come to fruition. The free-flowing nature of the international border travel there is fantastic. But at the same time, it's still met with very steep drop-off fees, picking up in one country and dropping off in another. So the financial incentive is very strong there, whereas the mode of travel is much higher. It's much less frictionless than traveling across the US-Canadian border, for example, which is a little bit more of a maneuver.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, these are some great aspirations, right? Like, so you want to sort of, you see yourself in the bigger picture. I want to sort of, see, like, hopefully you're able to also roll out in the European region. Perhaps you would also have to adapt your platform with multiple language options, as soon as you come to Europe.
Well, it's a challenge. And I mean, a lot of mentorship we received in the early days was, just pick a few cities and nail that first and then expand. We're like, no, we're just going to go immediately to every city in North America and not even tell the rental car companies about it. We're just going to do it. But then you realize as soon as it comes to support and actually working with customers, it would be a nightmare. You really need to plan it out. I mean, getting on the phone and trying to deal with customer support, someone in a completely different time zone, completely different language, I don't think you're going to be able to do a good job of it. And one of the advantages, in my opinion, that a startup has is you can really pour all of your time into customer support because comparatively you have fewer customers and more time to begin with, and that eventually levels out. So it's been a cornerstone of our sort of strategy so far, is just exuberant amounts of customer service. And, that's received a lot of the positive reviews we've had so far. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, what happens to the edge cases? I did not ask this question before. What I mean is, for example, if I take a trip from here to, I don't know, maybe the nearest city here is Brussels. So I go there and what if the person on the other side didn't pick up the car, or I don't know, the person who said like, we're going to, take the car from there, like he didn't do that, then what happens?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was an initial concern of ours as well too, and we looked into insurance products for this type of thing. It's too new and undefined that you can't get insurance for it, and it's almost not even worth it if you could. We're self-insuring it for it at the moment, but obviously it would be a terrible customer experience if one person changing their plans impacted you somehow. So that's part of the reason we act as a financial escrow. We take payments up front from both customers. There's no drop-off fees, and it's much more inexpensive than a traditional car rental. But at the same time, it's prepaid and non-refundable. So that's as an incentive to make it reliable for both parties. And then if the other driver isn't picking up, then we can make reparations with their contribution. We can use that for rectifying the situation. It's prepaid, non-refundable, but at the same time, your MirrorTrip is always guaranteed. So if for some reason the other person isn't there to pick it up, we're always going to make sure there's a car there for you. It's of none of your concern. But if you change your plans at the last minute, it's not a good platform for that. The way you save your money is by making plans in advance and sticking to them, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because why I ask this is because, people cancel their trip all the time. And, it might be interesting, from the customer perspective that they might be interested to cancel the trip any point in time. I'm just thinking about the incentive that I would get, as far as being able to book in advance, yet cancel, at least days in advance, right? So, so if there is flexibility as such, maybe it perhaps helps the people who are going to sign up.
Oh, absolutely. And as we scale and our algorithms become more refined, then I think ultimately we'll probably go the same way as the accommodations industry. where a certain degree of prior notice is usually sufficient that they can rebook that accommodation and someone else will pick it up. So yeah, we're not in the business to penalize and create a bad customer experience, but at the same time, the worst experience at the moment would be as if you turned up and there was no car. So I mean, that's the one we're looking to solve immediately, and then to iterate upon moving forward.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right, Reece. It was wonderful. Like you have so much going on at the moment. Especially with the COVID hit industry. I want to sort of congratulate one more time for starting this venture in spite of all the challenges. And I really would like to see like the other side of the COVID, like hopefully in 2022. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll hopefully be able to keep you posted with some good news. So thanks again.